I knew it was coming, but not like that. Not with a voicemail. 18 words, 18 sounds slamming the door on a lifetime. Don't come to the family reunion. We're done. 7:42 p.m., Thursday, Oregon. A light rain outside. The fireplace still burning inside. And in my phone, my father's voice as cold as when he made business decisions, short, frigid, emotionless. I listened to that voicemail twice. Not because I didn't believe it, but because a part of me was waiting for a feeling. Those words should have twisted a knife in my chest. But no. I only felt a strange silence. Before you dive deeper into my life story, I want you to pause for a moment. If you've ever been a woman who did everything right, but still got pushed aside, follow this channel. Because what's coming next will make you realize sometimes you have to be kicked out to find your own ground. Schemes. My name is Elena Quinn. I was born into a family where children weren't expected to speak up. My father, Charles Quinn, built Quinn Auto Tech from a small car shop in Eugene, Oregon, into the largest chain of garages in the region. My brother Brandon was always called the future heir. Handsome, charming, quick to move, but rarely looking back. And me, I went to Harvard, got an MBA, came back to help Dad run the Western branch. I negotiated, raised capital, put out fires. And sometimes forgot I was a daughter, not a machine. But here's what I learned later. Loyalty never guarantees acceptance. When I heard that voicemail, I was sitting in my simple apartment on a couch facing the fireplace. The sudden chill of Eugene's early spring made the fog outside the windows feel like a curtain of sadness. I once thought I was part of the family legacy, that hard work would be seen, that if I was useful enough, I'd be loved. But now, with those 18 words in the voicemail, they'd solved a math problem with no remainder. Elena was no longer valuable. I didn't call back. Didn't ask why. Didn't need a conversation. I just texted one word. Understood. And in that moment, I knew the game wasn't over. I was about to travel halfway across the world just to come back and cut the cord that had bound me for years. Because it wasn't them rejecting me. They'd just finalized what they'd been doing all along, excluding me. Not everyone who grows up in a wealthy family is lucky. Sometimes the walls built of gold are what make it hard to breathe. I learned to step lightly, speak softly, and smile at the right time since I was 7. Not because I was shy, but because in my house, silence was rewarded, and being too present made people uncomfortable. My father, Charles Quinn, didn't like noisy children, or questions, or anything that wasn't part of his plan. He was a lean man who lived on black coffee and principles. If you asked him the 3 most important things in life, he'd say, work, discipline, reputation. I never heard him mention family in that list, but I knew in his mind, family was a machine and we were the gears. Quinn Auto Tech started in an old garage south of Eugene. My grandfather fixed cars to get by, but my father was different. He didn't just want to repair cars, he wanted to control the market. And he did. 30 years later, the Quinn name was on every major garage sign across Oregon and neighboring states. From a young age, I was raised as an extension of that ambition. No one said it outright, but everything pointed that way. Brandon, my brother, was called the heir. He had chestnut hair, a charming smile, and showed up to events like a prince. But he also forgot his car keys, daily messed up accounting books carelessly, and often vanished during meetings. I was different. I wasn't mentioned in meetings. I wasn't taken to meet clients. But at 12, I knew how to order inventory on QuickBooks. At 16, I filled in for the head accountant during spring break to process payroll for 3 branches. I don't remember who taught me those things. Maybe no one did. I just learned because I had to. We don't hire outsiders. We raise replacements. That was my father's mantra. To him, I wasn't a daughter. I was a long-term investment. My mother, Marianne, was the only one in the house who didn't function like part of the machine. She was gentle, her voice soft as silk, but she didn't intervene. She just smiled, cooked folded receipts, and sometimes pulled me aside after meetings to whisper, "You have to be grateful, Elena. Your father is building a future for us all." I tried to be grateful. I excelled in school, won a full scholarship to Harvard. After my MBA, I got a job offer from a top logistics firm in Chicago. I almost accepted. But then a call from my father changed everything. "Family first, Elena. We need someone to manage the Western expansion." And I, as always, said yes. Back at Quinn Auto Tech, I didn't have my own office. No nameplate. I sat in a corner of an attic floor among old technical manuals and a broken printer. I didn't complain. I buried myself in work. I negotiated office leases, renegotiated loan interest rates, streamlined budgets. I worked as if it could save something or someone. But nothing changed. Brandon was still Brandon. He showed up late, left early, brought girlfriends to strategy meetings and signed orders without reading them. My father said nothing. When I reported errors, he just waved me off. He's learning to lead. You focus on your part, my part. That's when I truly realized I wasn't the heir. I was the support software, the auxiliary function, the one who kept things running but never seen on the board. I started documenting everything, not because I was suspicious, but because I was afraid I'd forget. I photographed reports, saved emails, tracked cash flows from new branches to central accounts. I wasn't planning to expose anyone. I just wanted a copy of the truth, because in a family like mine, the truth could easily be rewritten to favor the loudest voice. One late night after overtime, I came home and found my mother sitting alone in the living room. The golden light fell on her hair grayer than I remembered. She said nothing as I walked in, but as I passed, she grabbed my handlight as when she taught me to ride a bike. Are you okay? That question, simple as it was, froze me. No one had asked me that in years, and I didn't answer. I just nodded and went straight to my room. That night I couldn't sleep. A week later, my father brought a folder and placed it on the kitchen table like it was a congratulatory letter. The bank needs a co-signer for a $2.5 million loan to expand headquarters. Brandon can't. I don't want to use personal assets. Then he looked at me. No explanation. No family dinner, no discussion. Just a pen with the cap off. I looked at him, at Brandon, then at my mother who was clearing dishes, avoiding my eyes. No one spoke. I signed. Not because I was forced, but because I foolishly thought that if I kept being loyal, kept being quiet, kept being useful one day, they'd see me. I was wrong. People say life's big decisions are made in boardrooms under bright lights. For me, one of those decisions happened at the kitchen table, amid the smell of cold coffee and unwashed dishes. It was a regular Monday morning about 2 years ago. I'd just brewed myself a cup of tea and was about to check emails when my father walked into the kitchen. He carried a briefcase and the look of someone who'd already decided everything. Brandon followed, hands in pockets, eyes wandering. My mother was wiping down the counter, her movements so slow they were almost invisible. No one said hello. No one asked if I'd eaten breakfast. The air was heavy, like the whole house was holding its breath for something inevitable. My father placed the folder on the table, sliding it toward me. The bank approved the loan for headquarters expansion. $2.5 million. They need a co-signer. I looked at him, then Brandon, then my mother. No one said more. Only my father continued, his voice steady, as if reading a weekly report. Brandon's credit isn't enough. I don't want to use personal assets. Your name will make it easier. I opened the folder. All the paperwork was ready. Only a blank space for my signature. A blue ink pen sat next to it, cap off. No explanation, no thanks, no reason. I swallowed hard. Does anyone else know about this? My father looked at me like the question was irrelevant. No need. This is family business. Family business. I looked at the contract again. The amount was too large to be private, but I also knew that if I refused, I'd be seen as a traitor, a gear that wouldn't turn. I remembered the Chicago job offer, the generous salary, an office overlooking Lake Michigan, respect from day one. But I also remembered my father's call back then. You shouldn't abandon family when we need you. And now he needed me again. Not me. My name. Swens. I picked up the pen. My hand trembled slightly, not from fear, but because I sensed something bigger beginning. Maybe I hoped foolishly that this signature would be a turning point. That from here, I'd no longer be a shadow. That they'd look at me differently. I signed. No more questions, no demands, just signed. That afternoon, I returned to the Western Branch office as if nothing had happened. I opened spreadsheets, fixed budget discrepancies, answered client emails. No one in the family called to confirm. No one asked if I needed support. No one, not even my mother, sent a text. A week later, I got an email from the bank confirming the paperwork was complete. I wasn't added to the shareholder list. I wasn't invited to board meetings. My name appeared in one place, only co-signer. Part of me still waited for a thank you, a nod of recognition. But nothing came. Just silence. And a growing clarity I wasn't an insider. I was a temporary lever. Sazine. The next month, Brandon appeared in the internal newsletter as head of strategic development. He boasted on LinkedIn about leading the headquarters expansion. Meanwhile, I was still managing budgets and signing invoices for a leaking roof. I started to understand. I wasn't the heir. I was the tool. And when a tool finishes its job, it's put away. One evening, while organizing my home filing cabinet, I accidentally dropped a stack of old papers. Among them was an unopened letter stamped internally. I recognized my mother's handwriting. I didn't open it right away. I just stared at it as if it might speak on its own. I put it back in the drawer. Maybe I wasn't ready. Or maybe I was too used to not hearing her voice. In the weeks that followed, I noticed Brandon making riskier decisions. He signed contracts with new partners without notifying anyone. He increased marketing budgets without formal proposals. But my father said nothing. To him, it was Brandon testing his vision. I was reminded to control costs better. I increasingly felt like I was rowing a sinking boat in the middle of the ocean. Every time I patched a leak, they drilled 2 more. I started saving everything. I didn't know why I did it. Just that a part of me no longer trusted words. Only paper and signatures. I still remember the day my father walked into my office, the only time that year. He looked around, not hiding his disdain for the old wooden desk and the broken fan clanking loudly. You need to focus more. Don't let personal feelings affect your work. I looked at him, daring to speak for the first time I signed, because I thought I was part of the plan. He frowned. You are part, a supporting part. I nodded. But inside I knew I'd just learned the most expensive lesson of my life. Not everyone with your last name is family, and not everyone asked to sacrifice will be recognized. A year after I signed the $2.5 million loan, the company entered what they called strategic restructuring. The term first appeared in an internal email from Brandon Strategy Capitalized, followed by 3 exclamation marks. I wasn't at the meeting where that plan was drafted. Not invited. Not consulted. But I still did my job reviewing costs, analyzing data, keeping the budget from exploding due to grandiose, untested ideas. One March afternoon, I found a $12,000 invoice paid to a supplier 3 times in 3 months. Each was labeled marketing consulting services, but no campaigns matched. Digging deeper, I learned the recipient was a close friend of Brandon's, a non-official advisor who'd shown up at company parties. I printed the invoices and brought them to the regular budget meeting with my father and Brandon. Just the 3 of us. I placed the papers on the table. My voice calm. This has been repeated for 3 months. No output. I think we should stop it. Brandon smirked, leaning back. He's my friend. Good rates on other stuff. Don't make a fuss over petty costs. I turned to my father, waiting for a reaction. A frown, a reprimand. But he just lifted his coffee, blew on it, and said casually, like he was asking me to grab groceries, "Focus on your part. Don't act like an outsider." I don't remember what I did next. Maybe I nodded. Maybe I quietly gathered my papers. But I clearly remember the feeling in my chest like someone had locked the door to a room I didn't know I was never allowed to enter. Outsider. Me, the one who kept the company's cash flow steady through 3 tax seasons. Who negotiated a new headquarters lease 20% below market rate. Who put her name on the biggest loan in the company's history. Now I was called an outsider. In the weeks that followed, things began to change. Subtly, but noticeably. First, my system access was restricted. I could no longer view operational cost breakdowns like before. When I asked IT, they said the system was being restructured. Then my company card expired and wasn't renewed. I had to use my personal card for small expenses, submitting receipts for reimbursement. But refunds were late, sometimes vanishing without explanation. Then one day I got an email from accounting. You are no longer on the end of cycle approval list. All access has been transferred to the strategy department. Strategy, meaning Brandon. I tried to stay calm. No confrontation. No drama. I began saving everything, emails, texts, documents. I created a folder on my personal computer called Internal Access. Every time my permissions changed, I saved a screenshot. Every time someone signed for me, I kept the PDF. I didn't do it to strike back. I did it because I no longer trusted anyone to tell the truth except myself. One evening, I sat in my small kitchen, the yellow light glinting off an unfinished glass of wine. I called my mother. They've restricted my access. No one said anything. It's like it never existed. On the other end, her voice was faint, like crumpled paper. Don't confront them. Don't make things more tense. I gripped the phone, trying to keep my voice steady. Does this seem right to you? She was silent for a long time. Then she sighed. Your father always has his reasons. I nodded, though she couldn't see. So do I. The next week, Brandon organized a Las Vegas trip for the strategy team. Company funded. I got an internal email announcing leadership morale building trip. I wasn't invited. I also wasn't invited to the mid-year review meeting, though I still submitted full reports, still kept everything balanced. One morning, I arrived at the office to find my desk cleared out. Files, notebooks, even the broken-legged chair I used were gone. On the desk was a note temporarily moved to basement storage. No warning, no consultation, no apology. That night, I replayed the budget meeting recording where my father had said, "Don't act like an outsider." And I realized they weren't pushing me out of the system. They'd just confirmed I was never in it. I don't recall the exact moment I decided to start collecting evidence. Maybe it was after they cleared my office without warning. Or maybe the night I replayed my father calling me an outsider. But I vividly remember naming the new folder on my personal computer shadow ledger. It was an autumn evening, moonless with wind whistling through the old window frame, like it was whispering things no one wanted said aloud. I poured a glass of Cabernet, sat before the screen, opened every email, every ledger, every internal expense file, and began organizing. I didn't do it for revenge. I did it because I needed a place to store the truth in a system where everything could be bent to suit those in power. I found unclear expenses totaling tens of thousands, mostly tied to external consultants Brandon proposed. Some invoices bore my initials, but I'd never approved them. Some side contracts doubled in cost with no originals in the shared system. I started categorizing. Subfolders by month expense type responsible party. I password protected them, saved to an external drive, and printed 2 copies, one hidden at home, one stored at a lawyer's office. But to do that, I needed someone I could trust, and no one fit better than Danielle Keller. Samtasi. Danielle and I were in the same first-year law class at Harvard, though I later switched to business. She pursued family law, specializing in asset division bankruptcy and contract disputes. I'd heard she helped her sister escape a brutal divorce from a scheming real estate investor. I texted Danielle one late night, kept it brief, need to talk about a co-signed loan. Not a divorce, but just as dark. She replied in under 3 minutes, coffee at the usual spot. 9 a.m. tomorrow. I nodded, though she couldn't see. Saiksi. The small cafe near City Hall hadn't changed much. Same old wooden chairs, warm yellow lights, and soft jazz as a backdrop for weighty conversations. Danielle sat at the corner table in an olive blazer hair, neatly pinned, her face serious, as if she already knew my story wouldn't be light. I placed the external drive on the table. She didn't ask right away, just waited for me to speak. I co-signed a loan 2 years ago. Not a guarantor, just a co-signer. Now they're cutting me out of the system, but still using my name to maintain bank credit. Danielle opened her laptop, skimming the files I'd emailed earlier. Expense ledgers, shady invoices, screenshots of restricted access, and the original loan contract. After about 10 minutes, she stopped at page 7 of the contract. Her finger tapped a small line below my signature. Here it is. I leaned in. The fine print read like a legal footnote, co-signer, not personally guaranteeing assets not liable for repayment unless confirmed in writing. Danielle looked up. Elena. This means if you have no written confirmation of liability, you're not legally bound. And if you remove your name before restructuring or loan renewal, the bank must review the terms. I leaned back. My temple pulsed. So, I can withdraw my name, she nodded. If there's no sign of complicity, and with enough evidence of exclusion, forged signatures, restricted access, you can not only withdraw your name, you can request the bank launch an internal investigation. I was silent for a few seconds, then said, almost a whisper, I don't know if I'm planning an exit or building a defense. Danielle smiled, non-judgmental, best case it's both. See. That night I went home, opened Shadow Ledger, and renamed it Redemption Plan. No longer a vault for silent resentment. It was a map out of the maze. I printed the original loan contract, circled the line Danielle pointed out, taped it to the wall by my desk, a reminder, you owe nothing to those who give you no place. I began drafting a name withdrawal letter. Danielle edited every line, ensuring it was legal, concise, emotionless. I practiced talking to the bank. How to present evidence undeniably. How to keep my voice steady when accusations might come from my own family. I wasn't sure I was ready, but I knew I had no choice. Not every trap snaps shut with a crack. Some close, softly, gently, like an embrace. until you realize you can't breathe anymore. A month after meeting Danielle, I received my monthly credit statement from the bank, a habit I'd kept since signing the loan. I usually skimmed it for peace of mind, then deleted it, but this time a small line stopped me. Lane Holdings payment deferred in grace period. Primary contact Elena Quinn. I held my breath. Lane Holdings was a shell company my father set up years ago to hold Quinn Autotech's real estate assets. It was used during expansion, then seemed dormant. But now my name appeared as the representative contact. I called the bank, pretended to be an assistant verifying details. The person confirmed Elena Quinn was listed as the payment guarantor, considered the only reliable party in the current loan file. I hung up. My chest felt hollow, like someone had sucked out the air. They were using me, using my credit reputation to negotiate with the bank. Meanwhile, I'd been excluded from meetings, cut off from the system, unaware of any figures for over half a year. I opened Redemption Plan. All the documents I'd collected were there: financial reports, internal emails, restricted access proof, shady expense evidence. I reviewed from the start line by line, this time not to archive, but to investigate. After one night, I found over $40,000 in expenses labeled strategic consulting fees spread over 6 months, wired to one individual, Jordan M., a familiar name in Brandon's friend circle. No contracts attached, no job descriptions. I cross-checked payment invoices with campaigns run that period. Nothing matched. Some invoices read approved by EQ my initials. I'd never approved those. Sears. The next morning I returned to the bank. This time I booked a direct meeting with Keith Herber, the manager of Quinn Autotech's original loan. I brought a printed file, every item marked. We sat in a small meeting room off the transaction floor. Keith, graying hair, deep voice, polite, flipped through each page silently. When he reached the forged signatures, he looked at me for the first time. "Did you know you're the main reason the bank hasn't called the loan?" I nodded, and I'm the only one who didn't know the company missed 3 payments. He tapped his pen lightly on the table. "We can pause the loan trigger an internal audit if there's a valid concern." I slid the loan contract copy toward him, pointing to the familiar footnote. "I'm not a guarantor. I'm not liable without separate confirmation. And I've never signed any such document." Keith nodded again, gravely. "We'll review the entire file within 72 hours. Thank you, Elena." I stood. For the first time since being locked out, I didn't feel left behind. I felt like I was acting. Tudo. That evening I sat in my small office, yellow light spilling over scattered papers on the desk like puzzle pieces coming together. I opened the memo I'd written the previous week. I'm not a partner. I'm a name borrowed to keep the bank calm. I added a new line, and now I'm taking my name back. Sprui. Part of me still hoped it was a misunderstanding. That my father didn't know Brandon had forged signatures. That my mother, who never spoke louder than necessary, would say something. But deep down I knew this wasn't a misstep. It was a strategy. A strategy to strip me of power, but keep my financial value like a silent asset. I opened my email. Wrote to Danielle Bank, will investigate. Keith confirms contract can be renegotiated. I want to file for name withdrawal in 3 days. Also request a freeze on expense accounts if needed. Danielle replied quickly, "Enough evidence. Let's do it. Don't hesitate now." I reread her words multiple times, not because I wavered, but because I saw in them the decisiveness I'd given to others for years. Not anymore. Some people leave in anger with accusations, slamming doors, shouting. Me, I left, with a mouse click, silent. But that silence thundered through the system they'd built. A week after meeting Keith, I accessed Quinn Autotech's old system, where I once had high-level admin rights before being cut off. Turns out they hadn't changed the original password I'd created 2 years ago, when setting up the bank loan portal for expansion. I logged in, no rejection. The screen loaded slowly as if unsure I still belonged. But then all the familiar tabs appeared: loan documents, payment history, cosigner adjustment portal. I took a deep breath and started. I opened the loan configuration folder, a sub-branch I'd suggested creating for flexible contact and role changes over time. Back then I thought of convenience. Now it was my only exit. In the co-applicant status section, my name was still there. Next to it, a small option, modify or remove. I clicked remove. The system required an attached withdrawal letter with a signature. I'd prepared it, a PDF Danielle, and I drafted with sharp, neutral, undeniable language. I uploaded it, entered the personal PIN I'd set up on day 1, clicked submit. No alarms, no red warning screen. Just a faint gray line at the bottom: update received. Processing pending compliance review. I stared at the text for a few seconds. Nothing happened. And that was the point. Surprise. Next, I emailed Keith. Subject: short request for risk control review. Attached withdrawal letter: list of fraudulent transactions, forged signature evidence, and documentation of restricted access to prove I was no longer an active manager. I wrote briefly, professionally, without emotion. I request the bank temporarily freeze Lane Holdings as operating accounts, pending credit contract review. I am no longer legally involved and have exercised my right to withdraw my name per signed terms. I hit send. Spice. 3 hours later, I got Keith's reply request confirmed. We are freezing the primary account and halting major financial transactions to protect loan integrity. Senior personnel will be contacted within 24 hours. No thanks. No explanation. Just action operations paused. I leaned back in my chair, no smile, no sigh. Just closed my eyes for a moment. Not from fatigue, but because I'd done my part. Scene. The next morning I woke to 27 missed calls. 7 from Brandon, 11 from my father, 9 from unknown numbers, likely the head accountant or internal lawyer. I left my phone on silent, made breakfast, poured coffee, dressed like any other day. By noon, 15, more calls came. Then texts flooded in. What's going on, Brandon? Why did the bank freeze the accounts, Gordon accountant? What the hell did you do, Elena? My father. I didn't respond. I was no longer responsible for explaining. Cost. That afternoon, Danielle called. Her voice was steady and light as always, but I heard respect in it. Not pity, but recognition. They're calling me. Not threats, but demanding details on the withdrawal. I responded strictly per contract language. I nodded. Thanks. If they want to sue, let them try. Danielle chuckled softly. They won't. They need you more than you need them. And now you're out of that trap. Sa. As night fell, I opened Redemption Plan, creating a new folder. Aftermath. I saved all texts, voicemail recordings, screenshots of missed calls. Not for retaliation, but to remember every quiet action I took today was the result of hundreds of times I'd been ignored before. I also backed up all documents sent to the bank, handing them to Sabrina, my personal accountant from grad school. She reviewed everything, confirming your credit is clean. No ties, no repayment obligations. I wrote in my journal I withdrew my name not to escape, but because I finally accepted, I was never invited to join. Isius. That evening I opened my window, letting the early spring breeze fill the room. Eugene was calm as ever, rooftops unaware a family empire was trembling. I didn't feel joy or guilt, just light. Like I'd set down the final brick from my shoulders, the one they always said I had to carry for duty. But no one asked if I wanted to. I returned to my old office one Monday morning, not for nostalgia. I needed to retrieve a few personal items left behind before I was locked out. Some handwritten notebooks, a small framed photo, and an antique wall clock I'd bought with my first paycheck. Quinn Autotech still ran technically, but something had shifted. The air, the glances. Employees who once nodded at me now looked away as if afraid to be associated with something awkward. No matter, I didn't come to greet. I came to close. Oing. My office was the same tidy clean, no signs of disturbance. But the bottom drawer of my desk felt heavier than usual. When I pulled it open, I found an ivory envelope, no address, no sender. Just a familiar, slightly slanted handwriting on the front, for Elena if you come back. I recognized it instantly. My mother, Mary Ann. I sat in the chair, held the envelope with both hands, as if it might crumble if I wasn't careful. I opened it and pulled out a handwritten letter, 2 pages pale blue ink paper with faint floral borders. The only thing in my mother's life she ever chose because it was beautiful, not practical. I began reading. Dearest Elena, if you're reading this, it means you've come back and perhaps you're hurting. I don't know exactly what happened. I only know there will come a time when you're wounded by those who should have protected you. I wrote this after a family meeting where you were interrupted 10 times in 10 minutes. I saw your eyes, then calm yet weary. I meant to say something, but then your father looked at me and I fell silent again. I swallowed hard. The letter wasn't just for me. It was written for the years my mother had lived silently with a man like my father. I know who your father is. Control is his breath. And sometimes loving you in his way means not seeing who you truly are. I don't excuse him, nor do I forgive myself easily. But I want you to know I see you. I see it all. From the nights you worked on books late, the meetings you prepared alone, the nods you gave when handed more without a thank you. I didn't realize I was crying until a tear hit the paper. Everything I'd ever wanted from my mother, not protection, not a fight on my behalf, was just a quiet nod that I wasn't crazy, that I hadn't asked for too much. And now it was right before me in blue ink on paper. I don't know if you'll forgive me. Maybe you don't need to. I didn't write this to beg for that. I just want you to live your own life, not as a potential heir, not as a name balancing the company, not as the good daughter. Just Elena, the one I've always believed in, but was too afraid to say. I love you, whether you reply or not. Marianne. I folded the letter slowly, carefully. I looked around the room, once my trench, my outpost, my mental prison for nearly a decade, and I felt different, not because my mother apologized, but because finally someone acknowledged I'd existed. I stood, tucked the letter into my coat pocket, took down the wall clock, and left the room without looking back. That afternoon, I sat in my small apartment windows open to let sunlight pour in. On the table was my mother's letter. Next to it, a copy of the bank's confirmation Elena Quinn's name has been officially removed from the commercial loan. I didn't call my mother, didn't email, didn't text. I just took a blank card and wrote a few lines. Thank you, Mom. I'm living for the first time truly. I slipped it into an envelope. No address. I knew I'd find a moment to hand it to her. 2 weeks after the bank froze, Quinn Autotech's accounts, the heavy calls slowed. No more angry texts from my father. No more desperate emails from accounting. Just a thick silence, not unsettling anymore, but breathable. I thought all responses from them had stopped. But then, one Saturday morning, I received a small leather-bound package, no return address, just a short line, from Brandon. I hesitated for a moment, then opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter, 2.5 pages black ink, slightly messy but sincere. No heading, no formal "Dear Elena." My brother dove straight into the truth. I don't know why you're reading this. Not even sure you'll make it to the last line. But if you are, thank you. I paused. Brandon hadn't written more than 2-sentence texts in years. A handwritten letter from him was the last thing I'd expected. I'm not good at saying this, but I owe you a truth, or at least a piece of it. I've been jealous of you from early on. You did everything well, fast, precise. Me, I just smiled and dodged. Dad always said I had vision, you were hardworking. But I knew he was wrong. You weren't just hardworking, you were smarter, better than me, and that scared me. I read on, not bothering to stop the tears, not from pain, but because for the first time my brother wasn't hiding behind his usual mocking tone. I used that fear as a shield, to dump responsibility on you. From invoices you didn't know about to meetings you weren't invited to. I thought if I wore you down enough you'd leave, but you didn't. You endured. And that made me feel smaller. I never thought you'd dare withdraw your name, not because you're weak, but because I assumed you needed Dad's approval. But you did what I never had the guts to. You left. For real. I paused. Forgiveness didn't flare up, but a void was being filled with something else, truth. I'm at a rehab center outside town. You guessed right, I've had issues with pills since the first failed investment. But no one asked, and I didn't tell. Now I'm learning again basic finance, how to file taxes, how to apologize without dodging blame. I didn't expect forgiveness, just hoped one day when you think of me you won't feel betrayed. Just remember, I know I was wrong. I folded the letter, placed it on the table. No reply written, no call made, not yet. Just knowing that for the first time Brandon, the brother chosen to inherit, saw me as a person, not a scapegoat. That night I took the letter to the balcony. Light from other apartments spilled onto the paper, casting my shadow on the railing, like two people talking, me and a past version of Brandon who thought dodging was a way to survive. I whispered I don't forgive, but I hear you, and that for now was a start. Sasos. I tucked the letter into a brown folder labeled, Don't Seal, Leave Open. Some things don't need immediate decisions. Some apologies don't need replies, just acknowledgement. I knew the next chapter wasn't about revenge or defense. It was about rebuilding my way. Leona's, the red brick restaurant with low ceilings and soft yellow lights, was where my family held every major birthday. I blew out my first candle there. Once my father, tipsy, recounted his company building triumphs. My mother smiled as always. Brandon got to pick the music. And now they chose it to invite me. Not for work, not for duty, just because we miss you. I read that line on the birthday card dozens of times. No apology, no explanation. Just 3 signatures, Charles. Marianne, Brandon. I didn't respond, but I went. Not for forgiveness, but because endings need witnesses. Swandines. I arrived 15 minutes late. No rush, no apologies. I wore a white shirt, high collar, hair tied back, no perfume, no polite smile. Because real strength doesn't need embellishment. When I entered the private room by the fireplace, all 3 were there. My father back straight, jaw tight. My mother eyes averted. Brandon staring at his phone as if unsure this was real. The empty chair at the table's head was a challenge or a belated invitation. I pulled it out, sat down, didn't wait for anyone to speak. I'm not here for a birthday. No one objected. No one offered congratulations. Sweetie. My father spoke first. You made the bank question us. Projects stalled, accounts frozen. What more do you want? I replied calm, I don't want anything. I just stopped staying silent for you. Brandon's fists clenched. My mother started to speak, then swallowed her words. You might feel unfairly treated, my father continued, but you're part of the company. Your actions affected everyone. I nodded slightly, opened my bag, pulled out 2 envelopes. I came prepared. I placed one on the table. This is the document withdrawing my name from the company. Legal, irreversible. I placed the second envelope, slid it toward him. And this is a report for the state auditor. All fake invoices, improper expenses, and evidence of signature tampering are in there. No one moved. No one touched their water. Not a heavy breath. I looked straight into my father's eyes. I'm not destroying the legacy. I'm just removing the illusion that I ever belonged to it. See. His jaw tightened. My mother's hands trembled but stayed silent. Brandon looked at me for once without mockery. You really did it. I didn't answer. A beat later I stood, pushed my chair in like wrapping up a meeting. I hope you handle the rest like adults. And this time without my name. As I turned, my father called Elena, wait. I stopped, but didn't turn. Doing this, you're cutting yourself off from family. I said without hesitation, no. I'm just stopping the pretense that I was ever let in. Then I walked out. That night, back at my apartment, I felt a heaviness in my chest. Not resentment anymore, but the emptiness after a door closes. I didn't cry, didn't play music. I just sat in the couch, hands still warm from the memory. I'd lost a family, perhaps, but I'd reclaimed a name. Silence was once my greatest fear. Now it was the space where I could hear myself. The apartment I rented in Portland was on the 3rd floor of an old building, with large windows facing a park. Nothing lavish, just worn wood floors, a small bookshelf, and a desk just big enough for my laptop. But to me, it was the first place without smoke, the smoke of expectations, pressure, or quiet disappointment. I moved in right after the Leona's meeting. Didn't tell anyone. No forwarding address. Only Keith, the bank's credit officer, knew where I was because I needed a place for official confirmation letters. And then it came. One Wednesday morning in the iron mailbox outside my door, I found an envelope from the bank. White blue ink, no sender name, just a tracking barcode and bold all caps text. Name withdrawal confirmation E. Quinn. I opened it right there. 1 sheet bold text, commercial loan account 2876QL has been restructured. Elena Quinn's name is no longer legally bound. No financial obligations. No further action required. No apology. No thank you needed. Just a legal full stop after an uneasy chapter. I folded the letter, slipped it back, and tucked it into a folder labeled complete. I didn't celebrate. Didn't text anyone. I just started the coffee maker, and for the first time in years I didn't rush to check my phone. The day I officially withdrew my name was the day I started choosing how to live again. I revived an old MBA project. I'd shelved a consulting service for startups founded by female founders. Not big, not flashy, but real. I didn't need gold-embossed cards or a nameplate office with a nameplate. Just the right questions and a real listener. And I listened more keenly than ever. Because I'd known what it was to be dismissed. Exploited. Invisible. And now I knew now, and it shouldn't happen again to anyone else. 3 weeks later, I got a text from Danielle, the lawyer friend, who'd helped me untangle the financial trap. Elena, can you consult for a young founder? She's panicking over a partner taking control. I replied, send me her a time slot. Meet at the usual. And so one by one, I welcomed them women who no one defended, or who were learning to defend themselves. I didn't fix their lives. I just showed them they weren't crazy. And not alone. One early April evening, I sat in my small apartment, warm yellow light, the city's hum drifting softly through the window. On the desk, a cup of tea, the bank's confirmation letter, and files for 3 initial clients. The phone was silent. No urgent calls. No one needing me to fix their mess. No one ordering, interrupting, or saying, "Don't act like an outsider." Because I was an outsider now, and that didn't hurt me anymore. It felt like freedom. Before bed, I walked around the apartment, touched the desk's smooth wood lightly, closed my laptop, ran a finger over the note taped to my wall, a handwritten line. Silence is no longer punishment. It's space to grow. I set my alarm. Not for a meeting, but to wake early and walk in the nearby park. When I turned off the light, I knew this house wasn't burning anymore, and I didn't have to run. A full year since I withdrew my name from the loan and walked away from that final family meeting. A year since I stopped putting out fires in a house I hadn't set ablaze. A year since I chose to live without proving anything. I didn't mark that anniversary with a party or proclamation. I just did what I'd done all year, woke early, brewed coffee, scanned plans for new clients, and watered the plants on my windowsill. I'd helped 8 women-led startups find their own voice. No fanfare, no grand PR. Just women who, like me, were dismissed, told to behave now, signing their first contracts under their own names. And that's what felt like enough. That afternoon, I returned to my apartment. In the mailbox was an ivory envelope, textured paper, no return address. But the handwriting was achingly familiar. Slanted, neat, slightly hesitant for Elena on your birthday. I knew my mother's hand. I went inside, didn't rush to open it. I brewed tea, set the envelope on the table. Stared at it for a while, as if I could hear its contents. Then I opened it. A simple card, gray-green cover, embossed with a wildflower. Inside, no elaborate birthday wishes. Just a few handwritten lines, not for business, not for duty. Just because we miss you. Below, 3 signatures, Charles Marianne Brandon. I read it over and over, not from disbelief, but from unfamiliarity. No one mentioned the company. No talk of legacy or family first. No hints of obligation. Just an invitation. Quiet and honest. I didn't cry, didn't smile. I just slipped the card into the drawer with my mother's earlier letter, the one where she told me to live my own life. I didn't burn it, and that was a choice. That evening I walked through the park. The city buzzed, but my mind was still. I thought about those who'd left my life, those who'd taken my presence for granted, and those who for the first time sent an unconditional invitation. I didn't know if I'd reply, didn't know if there'd be a quiet dinner someday, but I knew one thing for sure: I had the choice. To stay silent, to speak, to leave a door cracked but not forced open. Before bed, I wrote a line on the first page of a new notebook, a birthday gift to myself. "You're not difficult, you're just newly visible." Then I turned off the light. The room was dark, but not heavy. It was calm, a calm I'd earned, not imposed. I didn't need to knock to be let in anymore. I'd built my own home, and for the first time I chose to stay. I once thought acceptance meant silence, proving worth through endurance. But after all this, I realized silence doesn't build kinship, and loyalty shouldn't be the price of being used. This story isn't about revenge. It's a journey of awakening of a woman once invisible in her own family. It reminds me, and I hope it reminds you, that we have the right to walk away from what's no longer home and build a new nest from what's left in our hands, however little, but ours. If you see yourself in this story, even just a piece, don't hesitate to share below. I want to hear you. And if you want to join more journeys of rebirth, follow this channel to catch the next stories, because sometimes just one listener is enough to make you feel seen. Thank you for staying until the end.